There are moments in life that refuse to announce themselves with noise. They do not arrive with certainty, applause, or dramatic events that everyone around you can recognize. Instead, they enter quietly, almost unnoticed, like a faint movement beneath still water. Most people dismiss these moments because they expect transformation to begin with something visible. They wait for circumstances to change before believing that they themselves have changed. Yet the deepest transformations never begin on the outside. They begin in the hidden places of the mind, long before reality catches up. If you have found yourself unable to explain what you have been feeling lately, do not rush to label it as confusion. There are seasons when your inner world begins rearranging itself before your outer life reflects anything different. During such times, ordinary experiences start carrying an unusual weight. A simple conversation lingers in your thoughts far longer than it should. A dream refuses to fade after you wake. A forgotten memory suddenly returns with unexpected clarity. An image, a place, or even a passing stranger awakens an emotion that seems larger than the moment itself. None of these experiences appear important when viewed separately. Yet together, they create the feeling that something beneath the surface has begun to move. The conscious mind prefers order. It wants clear explanations, predictable causes, and immediate answers. It trusts only what can be measured and understood. But there is another part of the psyche that speaks a different language. It does not communicate through logical arguments. It speaks through symbols, emotions, dreams, imagination, and subtle impressions. Most of the time, this deeper voice remains quiet because the noise of everyday life is too loud. Endless routines, constant distractions, and familiar habits leave little room for it to be heard. But when your life reaches a point where genuine growth becomes possible, that hidden voice begins to rise. It never forces itself upon you. It simply places something before your awareness that refuses to disappear. Perhaps you notice the same symbol appearing in different places. Perhaps a dream leaves you with an emotion more powerful than the images themselves. Perhaps an old question that you buried years ago suddenly demands an answer. These moments are not valuable because they predict your future. They matter because they reveal that your inner world is trying to become conscious of something it has long carried in silence. Many people make the mistake of searching everywhere outside themselves for meaning. They chase certainty in opinions, trends, predictions, or endless reassurance. Yet the most important discoveries begin when attention turns inward. The deeper layers of the psyche are always working, even when you are unaware of them. Every experience, every forgotten emotion, every unresolved conflict continues shaping your perception beneath the surface. You may believe that certain chapters of your life have ended, yet they remain alive within you until they are understood rather than merely remembered. This is why a single image or feeling can suddenly affect you so deeply. It touches something that has been waiting patiently beneath conscious awareness. It is not creating something new. It is revealing something that was already there. The appearance feels rare because these hidden contents do not emerge every day. They wait until the personality has developed enough strength to face them without becoming overwhelmed. Growth has never been about collecting more information. It has always been about becoming capable of seeing what was previously invisible. Two people may experience the exact same event, yet only one recognizes its deeper significance. The difference is not intelligence, it is readiness. The mind sees only what it has become prepared to understand. Think about how often life has tried to teach you the same lesson through different circumstances. Different people, different places, different years. Yet somehow the emotional pattern remained familiar. This happens because what is unresolved within continues expressing itself until it is brought into awareness. The outer situation changes, but the inner pattern repeats. Once that pattern becomes visible, something remarkable happens. What once controlled you, unconsciously, begins losing its power, because it has finally entered the light of awareness. That is why these quiet moments deserve your attention. Not because they promise magical answers, but because they invite honest observation. Instead of asking, "What does this mean for my future?" ask a different question. What part of myself is asking to be seen? That question changes everything. It shifts your focus from chasing certainty to discovering truth. It transforms curiosity into self-understanding. You may feel tempted to ignore these subtle experiences because they seem too small to matter. Yet history within the human soul shows that profound change rarely begins with certainty. It begins with a barely noticeable shift in awareness, a realization so quiet that only the attentive mind recognizes it. The moment itself appears ordinary, but the life that follows it is never quite the same. And that is how every true transformation first announces its arrival. Once that first quiet shift in awareness has taken place, something even more unsettling often follows. Instead of immediately feeling stronger, calmer, or more certain, you may find yourself confronted by emotions you believed you had already overcome. It can seem as though your progress has disappeared overnight. Old fears return without warning. Familiar insecurities begin speaking with new intensity. Memories that have remained silent for years suddenly become impossible to ignore. You may even wonder whether you are moving backward rather than forward. This is where many people lose trust in their own journey. They assume that if painful emotions have returned, then nothing has truly changed. But the mind does not reveal its deepest layers all at once. It reveals them gradually, according to your capacity to face them. What once remained hidden now steps into the light, not because it has grown stronger, but because you have grown capable of seeing it. Every person carries within themselves parts that have been pushed aside. There are emotions that were judged unacceptable, desires that were abandoned, talents that were never encouraged, fears that were hidden behind confidence, and wounds that were covered with constant activity. These forgotten pieces do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They continue living beneath awareness, quietly influencing decisions, relationships, and reactions in ways that often go unnoticed. Have you ever found yourself reacting far more intensely than a situation seemed to deserve? Perhaps someone's criticism felt unbearable. Perhaps another person's success stirred unexpected resentment. Perhaps a small disappointment left you emotionally exhausted for days. These reactions are rarely caused by the present moment alone. More often, they awaken something older that has never fully been understood. The outer event simply touches an inner place that has been waiting to be acknowledged. The instinctive response is usually resistance. We defend ourselves. We justify our behavior. We blame circumstances or other people because it feels easier than looking inward. The mind naturally protects the image we have built of ourselves. We want to believe we are completely rational, kind, patient, confident, or strong. Yet every human personality contains contradictions. Courage exists beside fear. Compassion exists beside anger. Confidence exists beside insecurity. Love exists beside resentment. Pretending that only one side exists does not make the other disappear. It merely forces it into the unconscious, where it begins influencing life without permission. Real transformation begins the moment you stop asking, "How do I get rid of these feelings?" and begin asking, "Why have they returned now?" That simple change in perspective opens a completely different path. Instead of treating uncomfortable emotions as enemies, you begin seeing them as unfinished conversations within your own psyche. This does not mean every feeling should be obeyed. Anger is not always wisdom. Fear is not always truth. Jealousy is not always a guide. But every emotion carries information. Even the emotions you dislike reveal something about your inner world. They expose unmet needs, hidden beliefs, unresolved memories, or neglected parts of yourself that have been waiting for attention. Ignoring them only delays the work that eventually must be done. It is often just before a major transformation that these hidden aspects become louder. They seem determined to interrupt your peace. In reality, they are asking to be integrated before you step into the next chapter of your life. An identity built upon denial cannot sustain lasting growth. Whatever remains unconscious eventually shapes your choices from behind the scenes. If you refuse to examine your fear, it quietly limits your opportunities. If you ignore your insecurity, it seeks constant approval from others. If you deny your anger, it may appear as bitterness, impatience, or emotional distance. What stays hidden does not stay harmless. This is why genuine self-knowledge requires courage rather than comfort. Looking inward is rarely pleasant at first. It asks you to meet the parts of yourself that you have spent years avoiding. Yet something remarkable happens when you stop fighting them. Their grip begins to weaken. The fear that once controlled you becomes something you can understand. The shame that once defined you becomes a story instead of an identity. The anger that once consumed you becomes a signal instead of a prison. You begin realizing that wholeness is not created by becoming perfect. It is created by becoming honest. The strongest people are not those who never experience darkness. They are those who refuse to let darkness remain unconscious. They learn from it, transform it, and allow it to become part of a wiser, more complete self. This process cannot be rushed. The psyche unfolds in its own rhythm. Some lessons return more than once, not because you have failed, but because each encounter allows you to understand them at a deeper level. Patience becomes just as important as courage. Every difficult emotion you face, consciously, becomes one less force, controlling your life from the shadows. So when those forgotten fears, old wounds, or uncomfortable truths begin appearing before you, resist the temptation to run from them. They may not be standing in the way of your transformation. They may be the final doorway leading you into it. After you begin facing the hidden parts of yourself instead of running from them, your relationship with the world begins to change in ways that are difficult to explain through ordinary logic alone. The external world has not necessarily changed, yet your experience of it feels different. Certain conversations seem to arrive at exactly the right moment. A forgotten book suddenly captures your attention with the very words you needed to hear. A symbol appears repeatedly in unexpected places. A dream echoes an inner struggle that you have never spoken aloud. A chance encounter leaves you with questions that remain long after the meeting has ended. Many people are quick to label these experiences as either meaningless coincidence or unquestionable supernatural signs. But the deeper psychological perspective asks something more valuable. Instead of immediately deciding what these moments are, it asks why they feel so meaningful to you. The significance does not always lie in the event itself. It often lies in the relationship between the event and your inner state. There are periods in life when the conscious mind and the deeper layers of the psyche begin moving toward greater harmony. During these periods, experiences that once seemed random suddenly feel connected. Not because the universe is sending secret instructions that only a chosen few can decode, but because your own awareness has become more sensitive to patterns that previously escaped your attention. Imagine walking through a forest every day. For years you notice only the obvious things: the path beneath your feet, the trees surrounding you, the destination ahead. Then one day, after your perception has quietly changed, you begin seeing details that were always present, but never truly noticed. The colors seem richer. The sounds carry more depth. The small movements of nature suddenly reveal an order that had remained invisible. The forest did not change overnight. You did. The same is true of the inner life. As awareness expands, certain experiences naturally stand out because they resonate with something awakening within you. A sentence spoken by a stranger may touch an unresolved question. A recurring image in your dreams may reflect a part of yourself seeking recognition. A coincidence may remind you of a decision you have been avoiding. The meaning does not exist independently of you. It emerges through the meeting between the outer event and your inner reality. This is why two people can witness the exact same occurrence and walk away with completely different experiences. One forgets it within minutes. The other carries it for years because it awakened something deeply personal. Meaning is never forced upon the psyche. It is discovered when inner readiness meets outer experience. Yet there is also a danger here. Once people begin noticing meaningful patterns, they sometimes become obsessed with searching for more. Every number becomes a prediction. Every coincidence becomes a command. Every unexpected event is treated as proof that someone else is controlling the direction of their life. Gradually, they surrender their own responsibility in the hope that certainty will arrive from outside themselves. But the deeper purpose of these meaningful moments is not to replace your judgment. They are not instructions that free you from making difficult choices. They are invitations to become more conscious of your own inner process. They encourage reflection, not dependence, curiosity, not certainty, awareness, not blind belief. When an experience captures your attention, pause before asking what it predicts. Ask instead what it awakens. Does it bring an old fear into the light? Does it remind you of a forgotten dream? Does it reveal a conflict between the life you are living and the person you are becoming? These questions lead inward, where lasting transformation always begins. The psyche has a remarkable way of arranging experiences into meaningful narratives once enough self-awareness has been developed. It gathers memories that once seemed unrelated. It connects emotions that appeared isolated. It reveals themes that have quietly shaped your life for years without your conscious knowledge. Looking backward, You begin seeing that many events you once dismissed eventually became turning points. Not because they contained magical power, but because they changed the way you understood yourself. This growing awareness also teaches humility. You no longer demand immediate explanations for everything that happens. Some experiences reveal their meaning only months or even years later. What feels confusing today may become perfectly clear once another piece of your inner journey falls into place. Patience becomes part of wisdom. You stop forcing conclusions and begin allowing understanding to mature naturally. As your inner world becomes more integrated, your attention also becomes more intentional. You are less distracted by constant noise and more receptive to quiet insight. You notice, not because life suddenly speaks louder, but because your own mind has finally become still enough to listen. In that silence, ordinary moments can carry extraordinary significance. Not because they promise your future, but because they illuminate your present, and sometimes that single moment of recognition becomes the beginning of everything that changes next. There comes a stage in every genuine transformation that almost no one speaks about, because, from the outside, it looks like everything is falling apart. After you have begun paying attention to your inner world, after you have faced the emotions you once avoided, and after you have started recognizing the meaningful patterns woven through your experiences, something unexpected begins to happen. The identity you have relied upon for years no longer fits as comfortably as it once did. This is one of the most confusing seasons a person can experience. Nothing appears dramatically different on the outside. Yet inwardly, you feel as though you are standing between two lives. The person you have always been no longer feels completely authentic, but the person you are becoming has not yet fully emerged. You find yourself in unfamiliar territory, unable to return to the old version of yourself, yet unable to clearly see what lies ahead. Most people interpret this feeling as failure. They believe they have lost direction, motivation, or purpose. They begin searching desperately for ways to restore the certainty they once had. They try to return to old routines, old beliefs, old relationships, or old ambitions, hoping to feel like themselves again. But something quietly resists. What once felt meaningful now feels strangely empty. What once inspired you now leaves you indifferent. What once defined your identity no longer carries the same emotional weight. This is not because something valuable has been taken from you. It is because your inner life has begun outgrowing the structure that once contained it. Every stage of life requires a different way of seeing yourself. The identity that protected you during one chapter cannot guide you forever. At first, we build ourselves from expectations. We become who others reward. We learn which emotions are acceptable, which dreams are practical, and which parts of ourselves should remain hidden. Without realizing it, we create a personality designed to gain approval, avoid rejection, and survive the environment in which we grew. There is nothing unusual about this. It is part of human development. But eventually, a moment arrives when that carefully constructed identity begins to feel too small. The roles you have been performing no longer express the fullness of who you are becoming. You begin sensing a quiet conflict between the life you are living and the deeper truth trying to emerge from within. This conflict is uncomfortable because the familiar always feels safer than the unknown. Even an imperfect identity offers certainty. We know how to behave. We know what others expect. We know how to maintain the image we have spent years building. Letting go of that image can feel like losing a part of ourselves. But consider this carefully. Perhaps what is disappearing is not your true self. Perhaps it is only the mask that once served a purpose, but can no longer carry you forward. Many people fear change because they mistake identity for permanence. They believe that if their opinions evolve, if their priorities shift, or if their relationships change, then they have somehow become inconsistent. Yet the psyche was never meant to remain fixed. Growth requires movement. What remains frozen eventually loses its vitality. There are moments when you may even feel emotionally empty. Passions that once drove you seem distant. Goals that once consumed your attention no longer excite you. This emptiness can be frightening because the mind immediately wants to fill it with something familiar. It seeks distraction, constant activity, or immediate certainty. But not every empty space is a problem waiting to be solved. Sometimes it is simply the space required for something more authentic to take shape. Think of a forest after old leaves have fallen. For a time, the trees appear lifeless. The branches seem bare. Nothing about the landscape suggests abundance. Yet beneath the surface, life has not disappeared. It is reorganizing itself in silence. The visible loss is making room for unseen growth. The same process unfolds within the human psyche. The collapse of an outdated identity often feels like loss, because you are measuring yourself by what is leaving, rather than by what is quietly developing. You cannot yet see the person you are becoming, so the absence of your former identity feels like emptiness. In truth, it is a transition. This stage demands extraordinary patience. The temptation will be to define yourself too quickly, to rush into a new role simply to escape uncertainty. But lasting transformation cannot be forced. The deeper personality unfolds gradually, revealing itself through repeated acts of honesty rather than sudden declarations. As this process continues, you begin noticing subtle but profound changes. Decisions become less driven by fear of rejection and more by inner conviction. Relationships become less about pleasing others and more about genuine connection. Success begins to mean alignment instead of appearance. You stop asking, "Who do people expect me to be?" and begin asking, "Who remains when I no longer need approval to feel complete?" That question changes everything. The life that once felt secure may no longer satisfy you, not because it was wrong, but because you have become capable of something deeper. The old identity was never meant to imprison you. It was only meant to carry you until you were ready to discover the self that had been quietly waiting beneath it all. And the moment the old self begins to dissolve is often the moment your true life finally begins. By the time the old identity begins to loosen its grip, something remarkable starts to emerge from within. It does not arrive as a loud announcement or a sudden certainty about your future. Instead, it reveals itself through quiet impulses that seem both unfamiliar and strangely natural at the same time. You begin feeling drawn toward ideas that once held little interest. You find yourself questioning old ambitions and becoming curious about paths you had never seriously considered. There is no clear explanation for this shift, yet it carries a sense of authenticity that is difficult to ignore. Many people assume that transformation means becoming someone completely different. They imagine that growth requires abandoning everything they have ever been and replacing it with an entirely new personality. But the deeper movement of the psyche does not ask you to become someone else. It asks you to become more fully yourself. The qualities you are discovering are not foreign to you. They have existed quietly within your inner world for years, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Every human being carries patterns of potential that extend far beyond the personality they display each day. Some people have spent years developing discipline while neglecting compassion. Others have mastered responsibility while ignoring creativity. Some have learned to care for everyone except themselves. Others have built strength while hiding tenderness. These neglected capacities do not disappear simply because they are unused. They remain within the psyche, waiting for circumstances that invite their expression. This is why periods of profound change often feel like an inner calling rather than an external demand. You may suddenly feel compelled to create instead of merely consume. You may desire truth more than approval. You may begin valuing silence over constant distraction or depth over constant achievement. These shifts are rarely accidental. They signal that different dimensions of your personality are asking for space within your life. Notice how naturally children express different aspects of themselves before the world teaches them which qualities deserve praise and which should remain hidden. Curiosity, imagination, courage, vulnerability, wonder, and playfulness emerge without calculation. As the years pass, many of these qualities become buried beneath expectations, responsibilities, and fear of judgment. The adult personality becomes efficient, predictable, and socially acceptable, yet often disconnected from its deeper vitality. Transformation is not about inventing new strengths. It is about remembering forgotten ones. This remembrance rarely happens all at once. It appears through repeated invitations. A book awakens an old fascination. A conversation sparks an unexpected desire to learn. A creative idea refuses to leave your mind. A dream presents an image that continues returning until you pay attention. These experiences are not demanding blind obedience. They are asking for honest exploration. The mistake many people make is believing that every inner impulse deserves immediate action. Discernment remains essential. Not every passing emotion reflects your deeper nature. Some impulses arise from fear, loneliness, or temporary excitement. The challenge is learning to distinguish between fleeting desires and the quieter voice that continues returning with patience. That deeper voice rarely pressures you. It does not shout over every distraction. It waits. It appears again and again, sometimes through different experiences, but with the same underlying message. Its persistence is not forceful. It is faithful. It remains present because it belongs to something fundamental within your own development. As you begin listening more carefully, you may notice that your definition of courage also changes. Courage is no longer proving yourself to others. It becomes the willingness to express qualities that have long remained hidden. For one person, courage means finally speaking honestly. For another, it means allowing softness where only strength was once permitted. For someone else, it means creating despite the possibility of criticism, or choosing a quieter life despite society's expectations of constant ambition. The most meaningful transformations often happen through these seemingly ordinary decisions. Day after day, you choose authenticity over performance. You choose understanding over judgment. You choose growth over familiarity. Gradually, the scattered pieces of your personality begin forming a more complete whole. You also become less interested in comparing your journey with that of others. When you are disconnected from yourself, comparison feels unavoidable because you are constantly searching outside for direction. But as your inner life becomes more integrated, another person's path no longer threatens your own. You recognize that each individual carries different unrealized possibilities, different struggles, and different lessons. What is unfolding within you cannot be measured against someone else's timeline. There is a quiet confidence that develops through this process. It is not the confidence of having all the answers. It is the confidence of knowing that your life no longer depends upon pretending to be someone you are not. You stop chasing identities that promise acceptance and begin cultivating the qualities that bring genuine inner alignment. Then something extraordinary happens. The person you once hoped to become no longer feels distant. You realize that the future has never been asking you to become someone new. It has simply been waiting for you to uncover the parts of yourself that were always there, patiently waiting beneath fear, expectation, and habit. And when those forgotten strengths finally step into the light, the path ahead becomes impossible to mistake. If you have followed this journey with complete honesty, then you may already recognize that the greatest changes in life are rarely announced by dramatic events. They are prepared quietly, patiently, beneath the surface of ordinary experience. Long before the world notices anything different about you, your inner world has already begun reshaping itself. The dreams that stayed with you, the emotions that demanded your attention, the hidden parts of your personality that refused to remain buried, the meaningful moments that invited reflection, and the gradual release of an identity that no longer belonged to you. All of these were never separate events. They were different expressions of the same unfolding process. Looking back, it becomes clear that nothing meaningful appeared by accident. Every difficult season carried a question. Every uncomfortable emotion pointed towards something that had been neglected. Every moment of uncertainty challenged the image you had created of yourself. At the time, these experiences may have seemed disconnected, even unfair. But the deeper mind does not always reveal its purpose immediately. It often allows understanding to emerge only after enough inner work has taken place. This is why there are moments that seem to come only once. Not because life will never offer another opportunity, but because there are certain stages of psychological growth that cannot be repeated in exactly the same way. Once you have truly seen something about yourself, you cannot become the person who was unaware of it. Once a hidden truth enters consciousness, it changes the relationship you have with your own life forever. Many people imagine that transformation happens through one perfect decision. They wait for a single day when fear disappears, confidence arrives, and every uncertainty is replaced with absolute clarity. But genuine transformation is much quieter than that. It is built through countless moments in which you choose awareness instead of avoidance, honesty instead of illusion, and responsibility instead of blame. These choices rarely attract attention from others, yet they gradually reshape the entire structure of your personality. There is a subtle temptation that appears near the end of every major transition. It is the desire to return to what is familiar, simply because it is familiar. Even after recognizing the limitations of your former identity, even after understanding the patterns that have held you back, The comfort of old habits can still call you. The known feels safer than the unknown, even when the known no longer allows you to grow. This is the final test that many people never recognize. It does not ask whether you understand yourself intellectually. It asks whether you are willing to live according to what you now know. Knowledge without action leaves the personality divided. One part sees the truth, while another continues repeating the same unconscious patterns. Inner conflict remains because understanding has not yet become embodied in daily life. The deeper self does not demand perfection. It does not expect you to eliminate every fear before moving forward. Fear may still be present. Doubt may still visit you. There may still be days when uncertainty feels overwhelming. But there is a profound difference between a person who is controlled by fear and a person who walks forward despite feeling it. Transformation is not measured by the absence of struggle. It is measured by the relationship you develop with it as your inner life becomes more integrated. You begin noticing that your decisions arise from a different place. You no longer seek constant validation before trusting your own judgment. You become less concerned with maintaining appearances and more committed to living in alignment with your deepest values. You stop asking whether others approve of your path and begin asking whether your choices reflect the truth you have discovered within yourself. This quiet alignment changes everything. Relationships become more authentic because they are no longer built upon masks. Work becomes more meaningful because it reflects genuine purpose instead of borrowed expectations. Even moments of solitude begin to feel different. Silence no longer feels empty because you are no longer trying to escape yourself. The inner conflict that once consumed so much energy gradually gives way to a deeper sense of coherence. You also come to understand that growth is never a destination where nothing else remains to learn. The psyche continues unfolding throughout life. Each stage reveals new questions, new possibilities, and new dimensions of yourself that were previously hidden. What changes is not the existence of challenges, but your capacity to meet them consciously. The unknown no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes a place where new understanding can emerge. And this is why the moment before a great change is so easily overlooked. People expect fireworks, certainty, or undeniable proof that everything is about to transform. Instead, what often appears is something much quieter. A new way of seeing yourself. A deeper honesty. A willingness to release what no longer reflects who you are. A calm recognition that you cannot return to the person you once believed yourself to be. That is the rare appearance, not a sign descending from outside, but the deeper self finally becoming visible within your own awareness. When you truly see it, nothing inside you remains the same again.